The Last of Us is a deeply emotional tale, a story that, at its heart, is about humanity, and how despite all of our higher ideals, we are never more than a single step away from becoming as the feral creatures which now pervade the world. A story about how even our best intentions can result in dire, selfish consequences, and how we must ultimately live with each and every one of our ill-considered decisions. It is a tale that tells of recompense, and the dark path of revenge it would lead to. But what if the story were not to end as dire as we may have come to expect? For like a moth to the flame, so too may humanity be drawn back to the light, through the actions of one seeking only her final redemption. Gods had begun. Humanity had all players deep and challenging, different is less likely to get me horribly Having lost everything she had ever cared about, and forced to live her greatest fear, Ellie now dwells among the wilds, alone, unkempt and uncaring. The last shreds of her humanity stripped away along with her last ties to Joel. Once her life could have meant something, but he had taken that from her. A foolhardy notion filling his head that a single girl was more important than the entire human race. But to him she was, and it didn't matter that she would hate him for it, so long as she lived and learned and loved. It is something of a tragedy then, that she would so casually toss away the life Joel wanted for her, in the careless pursuit of a revenge he would never have condoned. Truly it was more than simple revenge though, instead a quest to prove a forgiveness she had never had a chance to give. Even after a second chance at repose, Ellie would still choose to give in to her own darker nature, condemning herself forevermore to be as the savage beasts that had torn apart civilization. Only in the last moments she would relent, just long enough to ensure that all her struggles, all her loss had meant nothing. Even so, this last-minute reprieve would ensure that a sliver of humanity she thought she had abandoned would be preserved, and it would be this sliver that would place her on a path to eventual redemption. Years after leaving the homestead for the last time, and believed dead by most in Jackson, Ellie would be sought out by Joel's brother, the only one who had ever really understood her motives, for his were much the same. Despite protests from those of the town, Tommy insists on seeking out Ellie to inform her that JJ, now a young child, had fallen sick after being exposed to a small amount of fungal spores. While his condition was slow progressing, the outcome would be inevitable, and Tommy believed that Ellie should travel back with him to say goodbye. Initially she refuses, citing how Dina would not be pleased about her coming back, but Tommy remarks that if it was him, then he would hate to lose another loved one without saying goodbye. This angers Ellie, but convinces her to return with him, if only to visit JJ, after which they would never see her again. During their journey, Tommy talks about Jackson, everyone's lives there, and how it's not the same without Ellie, but she remains silent, not wanting to engage with the past. Arriving at Jackson, Ellie tries to keep her head down, but is still recognized by a few people who greet her cautiously, and as they approach Dina's house, Tommy advises her to let him do the talking. Even so, as soon as Dina opens the door, she uneasily acknowledges Ellie, before Tommy assures her that it was his idea to bring her to see JJ. Tentatively allowing them in, she watches Ellie cautiously, without a word being exchanged, and then guides them through the house, to a bedroom where a sickly JJ lays in bed. Immediately Ellie's stoic demeanour breaks as she goes to his side, and after a few moments, Dina asks her how she's been, prompting them to awkwardly share a few words, with Ellie mentioning that she's been having a few headaches recently. Finally, Dina asks if it helped, implying the hunting down and killing of Abby, but Ellie doesn't respond, instead stroking JJ's head one more time and turning to leave, giving Dina a final remorseful glance as she does. Upon leaving with Tommy, Ellie is distraught at JJ's condition, and laments that if Joel had left her with the Fireflies, then there would be a cure by now, and he would not have to be ill. Despite Tommy's reassurances that everything will work out, Ellie suddenly reveals to him that Abby is alive, and if she could find her, then her father's work might be able to help save JJ. But Tommy becomes enraged that Abby is not dead, before realizing what Ellie is suggesting. He refuses to let her do it, citing how Joel wanted her to live, but she simply states that Joel made a mistake, that she has wasted her life anyway, and wants to make it all mean something. After some convincing, Tommy insists that he at least go with her, and she reluctantly agrees. Upon gathering supplies and leaving a note for Dina, Ellie and Tommy leave for a local outpost to follow up on rumours about reformed Fireflies. Their journey takes them across the country, with Ellie experiencing headaches and dizziness along the way. They chase rumours and meet friend and foe alike, before finally finding themselves at Catalina Island, headquarters of the new Fireflies. The Fireflies are wary of the newcomers, but then Lev emerges and recognizes Ellie, having her and Tommy taken prisoner until Abby, now a high-ranking member of the Fireflies, returns to base. When she does, she has them released, stating that they spared each other's lives before and that they're as good as even now. After the years changing them both, Ellie and Abby are finally able to have a somewhat civil conversation, with Abby acknowledging that she understands why Joel did what he did, and that it wasn't right, but she would do the same for Lev. Likewise, Ellie admits that their motivations were much the same, but too late did she realize that Joel would never have wanted her to waste her life on revenge. Eventually, she tells Abby why she sought her out, and that she is willing to undergo the operation to remove the fungal growth in her head so that a cure can be created. Abby advises that between Joel's escape with Ellie and the Fireflies collapsing, the research has been lost, but she might know how to recover it now that there is a reason to. They both agree to leave their grievances in the past and go together to uncover the research of Abby's father. To make sure the trip is worthwhile though, Ellie agrees to undergo some tests to ensure her immunity is still viable, which she jokes that it should be, given the several more bites she has received living in the wilds. But during this time, Tommy is overcome with rage at seeing Abby again, not just for Joel, but also for his own wounds that she inflicted, and attempts to kill her, but is overpowered and almost put to death. Ellie manages to stop the execution though, threatening not to go through with the cure procedure if they kill Tommy, at which point they spare him and Ellie angrily tells him to go back to Jackson. He tries to get her to go with him, stating that she shouldn't give up her life for them, but she tells him that she is doing it all for JJ, and besides, the tests have shown her that the additional bite wounds have caused the fungal tumour in her brain to grow to the point that it is now killing her. He reluctantly gives a tearful goodbye as he sets off to Jackson, while Ellie and Abby make their way to find the research materials. During the journey, Ellie begins to experience worse and worse headaches and dizziness to the point that she blacks out, during which she has hallucinations of Joel telling her that he didn't regret what he had done and that he would do it again if he had to. She awakens to Abby telling her that her condition is getting worse, and they continue to an abandoned Firefly base. Proceeding to search the base for the research, Ellie starts struggling to stand and blacks out again, hallucinating Joel again, telling her what really happened at St. Mary's Hospital. Once more she awakens to Abby, who says that she's found the research, but they are quickly chased out of the base by infected. Once safe, Abby looks through the research, but finds it to be incomplete. She has a brief outburst of anger as Ellie does her best to compose herself, before Abby remembers that her father kept handwritten notes in a safe at St. Mary's. She considers that it's a long shot, and isn't even sure if the safe was cleared out or not, but knows it's their only chance, and because of Ellie's health, decides to go alone. Despite barely being able to stand anymore, Ellie insists on going with her, and together they travel to where it all began, where Joel had chosen Ellie over the entire human race. After searching her father's old office, Abby finds the notes she is looking for, just in time for Ellie to black out again. This time she hallucinates being back on the operating table as Joel comes to rescue her, but she tells him that she needs to go through with the operation, that it's the only way that she can keep him safe, and that he shouldn't be upset, because it will lead to a better world, and her life will finally have meant something. Joel simply replies that she always had meant something, and Ellie at last puts her arms around him and thanks him for always caring, even when she did not. With that, she finally lets the burden of Joel's memory go, and wakes up en route back to Catalina Island. Abby remarks that she was concerned Ellie had already died, and goes on to admit that she takes no enjoyment from what is going to happen, having come to feel that she owed Ellie a debt for freeing her and Lev from the Rattlers. If not for the fact that Ellie had given up her second chance at a life with Dina and JJ, then Abby and Lev would not have been granted theirs. Blacking out again as Catalina comes into view, Ellie would intermittently awaken in a hospital bed over the next few days, as the research is being reviewed, until the day arrives when Abby mournfully tells her that they think they're ready. In semi-consciousness, Ellie is moved to the operating room, with many Fireflies gathered to show their respect and appreciation. As she is placed under anesthesia, Abby thanks her for what she is doing, and with lucidity slipping away from her, Ellie simply states, "You'll be okay now, JJ." The tumour is successfully removed, and over the next few weeks it is analysed before a cure of sorts is indeed developed. While it cannot cure those who have already succumbed to the fungus, it can be used as an inoculation, or even vaccine for those like JJ who are still fighting the infection. The Fireflies would set up a network of distribution, and slowly the cure would spread across the country, with Abby herself resolving to take a supply of the cure to Jackson, along with Ellie's body. Regardless of the hate he still harbours towards her, Tommy admits Abby's caravan to Jackson, not wanting to squander Ellie's sacrifice, and condemn the town because of his own selfishness. JJ, along with everyone else, is administered the cure, and he appears to respond well, but given his advanced condition, only time would tell if he makes a full recovery. When Tommy had returned to Jackson and told Dina what Ellie was doing, she had retreated into solitude with JJ, but only now, upon seeing her body, does she finally break down over Ellie's death. A funeral is organised, as Ellie is laid to rest next to Joel, and the whole town comes out in mourning and thanks for what she has done for them. After the funeral, Dina returns home with a much healthier looking JJ and finally opens the note that Ellie had left her, only now having built up the nerve to read it. Dina, I've made a lot of mistakes and leaving you and JJ was the worst, but it wouldn't have been fair on you to have to live with me like that. Just know that I never stopped loving either one of you, and what I go to do now is only for him. I guess it's not always what you're willing to live for, but what we're prepared to die for. Look after each other, you, JJ, Tommy, because no one else will, and, well, you're the last of us.